Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. We're going to jump right into it. Just yesterday, Dick Cheney has died. Now, this isn't going to be a RIP type video. You know, the controversy surrounding Dick Cheney, it his legacy is definitely something that we will all remember as being shrouded in indignities. And one of the worst things about a lot of these leaders, you know, it's been about it's about to be about what, 23 years since the war in Iraq. And when I found out the news that Dick Cheney had passed away, the the feelings I felt was kind of like, you know, I didn't really give a fuck. It's just an bygone era of another one of Bush's cronies. Now, I know some people are thinking, how could you say that? And this is the point that I want to make. Warmongers should not be glorified nor respected. And Dick Cheney was a warmonger. As simple as that. He went to war for the sole purpose of pushing Saddam Hussein out of Iraq, but more so to have a colonial idealism about Iraq, to where, because he was a businessman, because he was the head of Halliburton, he was trying so hard to get the American people on his side about an unjustified war, because at the end of the day, it was all about business. Wasn't about what people truly believe it was, which some of us will say, well, it was about liberating the people of Iraq. No, it wasn't. Operation Iraqi Freedom was only successful in capturing Saddam, but it didn't really truly liberate the people of Iraq. The people of Iraq liberated themselves. They just liked the idea that the Americans came and supported them. But they didn't need the Americans to help them liberate their own fucking country. And this is what I was saying about why me personally, I don't like despots and I don't like warmongers. And to me, warmongers have a nice place in hell, because the way that Dick Cheney went about the war in Iraq was he lied to the American people. We all saw on television, even when I was younger, I was no more than 13 years old, but I learned a lot from watching leaders of our own nation try to justify bloodshed and killing and the unjustified maiming of the Iraqi people. They say a war doesn't really hurt you until you lose a member of your family, until you are bringing them back in a casket and in a body bag, or that they're back from doing 2, 3 tours in the middle of a desert where there are all types of improvised explosive devices, people coming out of huts, shooting high artillery weapons, and then those weapons, by the angle at which they shoot, ends up either making a soldier paralyzed or losing a limb or losing their eyesight and have to come back home because of it. This is what Dick Cheney was all about. This is what Donald Rumsfeld was all about. They didn't care about the American people. It was all about power for him. And being that Dick Cheney was a powerful person, he was able to wield his business and justify going into Iraq. And this is where we need to understand history because, 20 years down the line, some of the people that were born in the early 2000s, they don't know about this. They don't know about what was done because the history books is still kind of hot on the issue of not talking about it yet, just like they don't talk about Vietnam. But when you have a situation where, the most powerful person in the world, well, he made himself powerful through the vice presidency. He is the only man to actually wield power as a vice president over the executive office, even though vice presidents don't have that much power. He had exclusive power. He was like a one man governing body. And he used these antics to try to destroy our trust in leaders. And the one thing I've learned about the tenure of Dick Cheney's vice presidency is that no elected official can ever be trusted to have the interests of the American people. But it shouldn't have taken that long because most people have learned from the lessons of Vietnam. In this instance, Cheney had so much power and so much backing, even from General Colin Powell, which we know he almost destroyed the integrity of General Powell. And Powell went on to recuse himself and actually walk away with his 5 star with his 5 stars intact because he didn't want to go on lying to the American people. He had integrity enough to say there were no weapons of mass destruction, that the war was unjustified. and that we did not need to be there putting unnecessary casualties and ground troops at risk just to capture one man. But then it became after Operation Iraqi Freedom and capturing Saddam Hussein, you know, he wanted to go even a step further. He wanted to make the American presence felt in Iraq. And this is how we ended up morphing into a 20-year war and a two front war in most cases. One of the things I've learned from his death is he's not to be remembered as, oh, he's a gracious man, and we sit up here and we talk about how gracious and how, uh Dick Cheney was the last of great politicians because he wasn't like Trump. And we having right now in the media this comparison between the Trump era and the Bush era. And I tell people, be very careful about that, because the media right now, they're trying to make Dick Cheney to be this saint like character, like he was a saint, but he wasn't. He lied. Donald Rumsfeld lied, and they have blood on their hands because of the massive casualties that we lost in Iraq. And no American leader should be remembered for that. You tried to give us an unjustified war because you thought they were weapons of mass destruction when they weren't. And everybody circled around it. Oh, we're trying to defeat terrorism. We're trying to defeat terrorism abroad. And we're going to need the backing of the American people. And then when you criticize the war for what it was, they say, well, you're anti-American, and you're if you're against us, then you're with the terrorists. And all this shit, this spill that was happening between 2003 and 2006 about anti-American criticism and criticism of the war, it was crazy how so many people were being targeted by the government because they spoke out against Iraq, because they spoke out against Afghanistan. It's the same shit that we're seeing right now when it comes to Israel and Gaza. That you can't criticize a government, because if you criticize the Israelis, you get attacked as being anti-Semitic. But when we see these atrocities on television all the time, all day, nobody bats an eye, and the government comes after you. So I don't really see a difference between the Bush era and the Trump era, and that the only thing we're seeing is how government operates when it comes to people who dissent or speak out against atrocities. And if Dick Cheney is no different than a you know what, I'm not going to say it, but he's no different than those who slaughter people. You might know the name. He's no different than those who killed people during the Holocaust. Only difference is it's justified through corporate backing. And that's one of the things we need to understand. Donald Rumsfeld is and Dick Cheney, they are no heroes. They are just as bad as anybody that kills massive amounts of people, put people in positions to be killed through war. I have no respect for warmongers. And that's the thing. And you should not have respect for anybody that justifies war or military action through ground troops and carpet bombing and bombing Cambodia like Nixon did back in the 70s. There's no justification for that type of violence. And when you hear stuff like we're trying to defend America from tyranny, I'm trying to protect America from terrorism. And then it gets used as an excuse to commit atrocities against groups of people. And that's exactly what the war in Iraq was all about. Dick Cheney had so much power, but then the people, the soldiers that he put in harm's way. I remember sitting down one time and I was like 13 years old. And I remember there was a press conference between Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. And one of the reporters asked a question, you know, soldiers are complaining about not having sufficient tanks and sufficient Humvees. And he said to the reporter, Donald Rumsfeld said to a reporter, and Dick Cheney was standing right behind him. And he said, when you go to war, you go in with what you came with. And I'm like, wow, does this sound like a man who gives a shit about putting people in harm's way? When you go to war, you go in with what you came with. So, not acknowledging the fact that you have broken tanks and broken Humvees that can't get you across the desert, you're putting young men and young women who were on the front lines and in the infantry and insurgents in the way. Then there's the shit that happened in Fallujah. Had mass casualties. That was in 2005. We had shit in Fallujah. Then there was the car bombing in Kabul. And with each incident that happened, there was still he still justified American citizens to keep pushing through to Baghdad, through to Fallujah and Kabul. Didn't matter if there were roadside bombs, didn't matter if Humvees were getting blown to pieces and blown to bits. Never mind that some of these soldiers lost their eyesight, lost their limbs, lost their genitals, getting their bodies blown up by IEDs. He didn't give a shit then. And even then, he's still not repentant about the whole situation. Dick Cheney was nothing more than just power hungry. And the only thing he could only really truly be remembered for was how he lied about the justification to going in Iraq and invading Iraq. You knew what you really was there for. And that's what I want people to understand. When you turn on your TV, don't get into this shit about, oh, he was a great man, and Trump and Dick Cheney didn't see eye to eye, but I don't see him any different than Donald Trump, because they're both corporate hounds that use their money to justify war. And when are we gonna stop believing in this shit? Stop allowing the media to paint these saint like figures to us, knowing what they did 25 years ago. It's so easy to forget history. It's so easy to forget the images of tanks, IEDs. It's been a long time. I admit that. I admit that. For some of you that are my age, because I'm 35, for some of you, it's been a long time. And it has. The 2000s hasn't been that long ago. So I can understand people have selective memory when it comes to what's being put out in the media and what we remember coming up when we saw the Iraq war take place. And we saw all the bombs on Fox News, green lights flying and flickering in the air to see what was down on the ground and what was happening. You could easily forget that. Hell, some people, if you're old, you're just as old as me. Some of y'all forgot about the first Gulf War, and why there was a justification for going there under George H.W. Bush. But Dick Cheney, don't let the bullshit fool you. The Bush era was just as worse as the Trump era, and there's really no contrast between the two. If you think that this era is worse than the Bush era, you really need to look consciously at history. There's never been a time more worse than what was going on in the early 2000s. Sometimes I don't even want to talk about the early 2000s because of how horrible it was. And you notice if you grew up in that era, there wasn't anything good about those years. And Dick Cheney was just a part of that. Now, with Dick Cheney gone, you know, now Bush's number might be coming up soon. Shit, he's 79 years old, about to be 80. We got a lot of things. We're seeing an era kind of just completely die off as this decade starts to come to a close. But make no mistake, don't forget history. Don't forget what Dick Cheney, who the real Dick Cheney really was. Because the media is going to want to paint a saint picture, a saint like picture of him. He was no saint. He has blood on his hands just as well as Saddam has blood on his hands when he murdered his own people. They are both warmongers, and warmongers should not be celebrated. This has been another Media Talks TV. Be sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe. Got more videos coming up soon. Bear with me. It's been a while. I'm Tony J. Hope y'all have a good holiday. I know it's bad out there. Peace out.